the first contract, which was coming to an end in December. Unfortunately, at that time, when we had originally bid over the summer, market conditions were not favorable. The prices came in at higher than the PSE&G price, and the decision was made at that time to not award a contract, and rather to let. And then when the first contract expired in December, folks were transitioned back to PSE&G power supply at the end of the first contract. So we kind of kept an eye on the marketplace, and then when we thought the market conditions had improved, we went back out for refreshed pricing in November. And on November 4th, we received competitive proposals again. And this time we did get favorable pricing. We had 5 suppliers competing. And the proposal by Energy Harbor for a 17-month contract beginning in April 2021 with a 40% renewable energy content was selected as providing the most overall value by the township. It had the required amount of renewable energy, and they had the lowest price by a fair margin relative to the other 4 bidders. The 40% renewable energy content in this contract is comprised of I'll say two sections. I'll call it. The state of New Jersey requires a minimum of 23.5% renewable energy. That's required of all suppliers, and that's what's included in your basic generation service supply from PSE&G. So what we asked for on top of that 23.5%, that is the standard product for all suppliers, we asked for an additional amount to get us up to 40% in total. That 40% is comprised of about 5% in-state New Jersey solar and about 35% regional renewable, which is primarily wind. And we have the term RECs in there, RECs. That's a renewable energy certificate. That is the commodity by which renewable energy is traded in the marketplace in this part of the country, and actually throughout the country for that matter. And so RECs are a commodity that's traded separately than the energy, and those are purchased by our supplier to meet the obligations that the contract provides. The contract price is 12.696 cents per kilowatt hour. And as you probably notice, when you're on PSE&G power supply, their net price, their price to compare, varies on a monthly basis, sometimes pretty substantially. They have a base rate that's pretty flat, and they have a monthly adjustment factor that makes the rate go up and down. But even with those monthly fluctuations, and even in reflecting the fact that we have almost twice the renewable energy as the PSE&G product, the SEA contract is projected to provide savings. I will tell you, in what the numbers that were originally that were in the mailing that went out at the time we awarded the contract. And when the mailing was prepared, our best estimate was about a $20 savings as compared to PSE&G over the life of the contract. I will tell you that there was a recently announced PSE&G price increase that will take effect in June, which we were fairly confident was going to happen, but we tend to be conservative, so we did not include that what we expected to happen into the savings estimate. So that's why we kept our initial savings estimate at 20. And now that PSE&G has actually announced and published their new tariffs that will take effect in June, we're confident saying that the current estimate is about $50 to $60 in savings for the typical resident over the 17 months. The program includes 100% voluntary renewable product. On my screen anyway, Lauren, the bottom is being cut off. Is there any way to adjust I have my written version here, but the folks may not be able to follow along. I don't know if everyone else is seeing the same thing that I am.
Well, it was up for a minute. You just took it down.
Lauren, can you get it back up? Working on it. You're muted.
You're muted also.
If you share it with.
Okay, so can you see this? Can you see it, or you cannot see the
No,
screen?
we're still seeing you. And
okay, my apologies. There we go.
There we go. It's still cut off at the bottom. If you can't fix it, I'll just, I have there's only like one line at the bottom cut off. I think this presentation will be posted, or maybe it has already up on the township's website. And I have a hard copy in front of me, so I can read the last line. And then why don't we just do that rather than messing around and risk having it go dead again? So the 100%, the program also includes a voluntary 100% renewable product. We call that an opt-up product. So you can opt up voluntarily on an individual basis to the 100% product. That carries a price premium of 0.00741. So that's about 0.7 cents per kilowatt hour. That translates to an extra cost above the base SCA contract of about $5 or $6 a month, depending on your usage. And so that the contract price for that 100% product is 13.437 cents. Again, that's a voluntary individual decision to opt up to the 100% product. Okay, Laura. So what are some of the benefits of this program? So aggregate purchasing power creates the competition that provides residents with supply with high renewable energy at a competitive price. Really what we're doing is, having suppliers interested in coming at us under our terms, essentially, rather than them setting the terms, because we're offering a pool of, in this case, over 40,000 residential accounts between the 7 towns. So that creates a lot of interest among suppliers, and they're willing to bid on our terms and conditions as we dictate, rather than the typical scenario, if you're shopping on your own, is the supplier sets the conditions. So again, the renewable energy content of the base product for this program is about almost double the PSE&G supply. There are a number of consumer protections in there. The township, as I indicated, the township and the 7 towns dictated the terms and conditions in a way that they wanted favorable, and also that was consistent with the rules that are dictated by the state. So the contract was, again, reviewed by the state, the regulatory agencies. The price is known. It is not a variable price. It is a known and locked in price for the length of the contract. There are no what's called bait and switch prices. What we see very often in the competitive marketplace is sometimes suppliers offer what appears to be a fairly favorable rate, but then in the fine print, that rate is only good for, say, 3 months or 6 months. It's generally called like a teaser rate. And then it reverts to market-based variable prices, which can go through the roof and are not under your control, not predictable. And the other thing is there are no hidden fees. You can get out of the contract anywhere, anytime you want, including at the beginning, before the program even begins. And there are no fees, no termination fees. That is prohibited under the contract. The length of the contract is specified and is known. So it's 17 months, and that is it. At the end of the contract, one of two things will happen. Either the township will decide that it wants to do a third round of the program, and it goes out to bid again, and the bid is successful, in which case we roll over into a new contract. Or if there's no new contract at the end of this one, everyone would be reverted back and transition back to PSE&G power supply seamlessly, just like happened at the end of the round 1 contract. So those are the only options. There is no chance of what happens again with most other third-party supply contracts that you can get into, where maybe there's initial term, but at the end of that term, if you don't do anything and take a proactive action several months in advance, you will be automatically rolled over again, likely at a market rate, which could be through the roof in some cases. Okay, next slide, Laura. Some other benefits, again, transparency. This is very simple for the consumer. There's no contract that the consumer signs. There's a master contract signed by the township setting the terms. The price is known. It is transparent. Everyone is made aware of it. The exact content of the power supply is being provided to you, the 40% renewable, or 100% if you opt up. Again, you can get out of the contract anytime, including at the beginning now during this period before the contract even starts, with no exit or termination fee. No hassle, meaning no change in how you experience your bill. You still would receive one bill from PSE&G, and I'll show a little later in the presentation the only change you'll see on that bill. We call this a local purchasing effort. So You may or may not realize that PSE&G for going on 20 years now has been out of the power supply business. They are a wires company. They go out for customers who don't have their own third-party supplier. They go out to the wholesale market through an auction that's overseen by the state. The state tells the utility how long the contracts are to be, when they are to bid, and the renewable energy content, and that's it. So it's a vanilla product, the same for everyone. So under this type of program, under more local purchasing, it's where your municipality is going out to bid to provide another option for you under terms that meet the local priorities, the importance of renewable energy content and the consumer protections and things of that nature. Okay, good Lord. So this is not a new concept at this point. As I mentioned earlier, the law has been on the books for almost 20 years. I will say that the market in this area for GEA programs took off, I would say beginning around 2012 is when it really started taking off. And at this point, there's well over 50 towns, 50 towns in New Jersey have done this type of program. And I can share with you, certainly the towns that we've worked with, which has been over 24, the vast majority of those towns that have done it a first time have decided to do it a second time. And in some cases, a third or fourth or even a fifth time. So the experience has generally been positive from towns that have gone down this road. The round one program is estimated to have saved the residents in the 5 participating towns of round one about $2 million in the aggregate. And again, there are additional savings and enhanced renewable content for this second round of the program. And Maplewood, along with its fellow municipalities in the SEA, were trailblazers. They were one of the first communities in the state to embrace an enhanced renewable energy content. So I mentioned earlier that, going on about 9 years now, GEA has been prevalent in New Jersey, but it is only starting around 2019 when the R piece of it started coming in, the RGEA programs with the extra renewable content. And Maplewood and the other SEA municipalities were trailblazers in that regard. The voluntary 100% renewable opt-up product, while it is slightly higher than the PSE&G price, it is very competitive with other marketplace offerings for 100%, not only in price, but also in the content of the power, because the power is required to be sourced from our regional power grid, primarily wind power. Many, if not most, other 100% renewable products you might see in the marketplace, they're sourcing their power from, typically they don't specify, so that means it's coming from anywhere in the US, which typically means it's coming from somewhere out in say Texas or Oklahoma, where wind energy is much more plentiful most of the time, and it is therefore you're not really impacting the renewable energy market by buying renewable energy from those parts of the country. Whereas in this part of the country, it's wind power is much more valuable. It's closer. It's in our regional power grid, so it has a more local impact, and it's a higher quality. Essentially, it has a higher price premium. It is and it has a much more meaningful impact on the development of the renewable energy market. And the opt-up program, if you want to choose the 100% product, it's a simple phone call to Energy Harbor. I'm going to show in a couple slides. There are a number of ways to reach Energy Harbor and Gabel Associates if you want to just reach out with questions or opt out of the program, et cetera. But if you want to specifically opt up, it's the phone call method that we are encouraging. And I'll hit that again in a slide or two. So who is Energy Harbor? Energy Harbor is an electric power supplier. They are licensed by the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. So they are one of about 80 suppliers licensed to do business in the state of New Jersey in PSE&G territory. They're active in the state of New Jersey and throughout a good portion of North America. Certainly one of the largest suppliers in the country, currently serving over 700,000 residential customers, about 500,000 of whom are residential accounts that are participants in exactly this type of program, primarily in New Jersey, Illinois, and Ohio. The New Jersey market is fairly recent for Energy Harbor. They started getting into this market about a year ago. They now serve Piscataway and Plainsboro. They have for going on 6 months to a year now. And now they've, been selected by the 7 towns in the SEA, and they're active elsewhere. For questions regarding the program, or in order to opt out of the program if you don't want to be in the program, or to opt up to the 100% product, or if you just want to ask questions, you can reach Energy Harbor through their toll-free number, which is up there on the screen. It's also in the literature that was mailed to folks. You can email them, you can visit their website. And as I mentioned a moment ago, if you want to contact Energy Harbor to opt up, they have requested that we convey to residents that they utilize the telephone route. For this type of product, they would prefer to speak to the customer live. They will ask a few questions just to make sure you understand the product, that you understand and are volunteering to pay a little extra for that product. So they're encouraging you, if you want to specifically opt up to 100%, to call the toll-free number on the screen, and that's also included in the program literature. And Gabel Associates, that's myself, Lauren, and Jesse, and other folks back at the office. We are an independent energy consulting firm. We are registered with the state, with the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. We have been for about 20 years now. We are hired by the township and the other 6 municipalities specifically to assist with the implementation of this program. We, again, are independent. We are not affiliated with any retail supplier. Our job is to impartially assist the municipalities to go through the process and select the best deal if it's out there. If you have any questions for us, we are available to answer questions or take your request for opt up or opt out. Again, the opt up, we would prefer and direct you to Energy Harbor. But if you want to opt out of the program or ask questions of any nature, you can call our toll-free number there on the screen. You can visit our website, or typically the most efficient way is to email our help desk, which is up on the screen, and email, and one of our experts will provide a response to you. So how does the program work? Once the bid award was made, yes,
Bob, it's Mayor Frank. Can you repeat that phone number again?
Sure. Sure, I can do that. So our phone number, well, I'll give you both so the Energy Harbor number is 866-636-3749, and that's the number to call them to opt up specifically, or for any other reason you want to reach Energy Harbor. And then the Gabel Associates, our toll-free number is 855-365-0770.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the official implementation of the program, once the bid was done and the contracts were put in place between the towns and Energy Harbor, the next step was a mailing that went out on February 6th. And that mailing starts the beginning of a 30-day opt-out period, which is mandated by the BPU rules. So the mailing was sent out by Energy Harbor, but I can tell you that the content of that package was developed collaboratively between Energy Harbor, ourselves, and the municipality. And so that package went out to all residential customers in the township of PSE&G, with 2 exceptions. Folks that already have their own third-party supply contract, they were not included in the mailing. We did not get the specific information from PSE&G. The rules provide that if you have your own deal, that you are not initially included in the eligibility list. I'll get to it a little later. You're welcome to opt in, but you're not in the initial mailing. You'd have to do something affirmative. The second category is folks that have an existing solar panel system on their roofs. Again, I'll get into that in a later slide. And then thirdly, we have a small handful of residents who have asked to be placed on a do not disturb list, and those folks were removed from the list of the mailing list as well. So the mailing package included a introductory letter on one page. The backside of that page had a program summary, a one-page table, and then we also had a separate sheet with FAQs front and back on that separate sheet, which basically has the answers to almost every significant question that we've heard, through the years on these types of programs. We try to pack as much in there as we could. I will say there's a longer version of that FAQ that is up on the township's website, which has, I would say, a little longer winded answers to those questions, and then perhaps a few additional Q&As on there that, we couldn't fit within the limited space in the mailing. And finally, in the package, there was an opt-out card, which if you wanted to go that route on opting out of the program, you could just sign that, stick it in the business reply envelope that was provided, and put it in the mail. It's got a barcode on it. It's barcoded. Energy Harbor would just scan that and register your opt-out request. So again, if you decide to opt out, again, you can opt out during the initial 30-day period. I'll go to the bottom here. If you opt out at the end of the period by March 7th, you will not be enrolled at all. You'll just be pulled from the program and won't be enrolled. The opt-out methods are up here on the screen. All of these were also in the literature, program literature, which you received, and I believe is also available on the township's website. Again, you can sign and return in the postage paid envelope the opt-out card. You can call Energy Harbor's toll-free phone number. You can email Energy Harbor at the email address provided. You can visit our website, Gabel's website. You can email our help desk. So any of those methods you can use to opt out, whatever one is most convenient for you. We're trying to make this as easy as possible, whatever mechanism works best for you. Again, the initial opt-out period ends on March 7th. Folks who do not opt out, folks that do opt out by March 7th will not be enrolled in the program. After the initial 30-day opt-out period is over, Energy Harbor will begin enrolling residents for the service beginning with the April meter read date. And then, so if you're in the program, the service starts with the April meter read date. The Energy Harbor power supply charges would show up on your PSE&G bill beginning in May after your first billing cycle. Gail. So after the initial 30-day opt-out period, if you do not opt out by March 7th, your account will be enrolled by Energy Harbor. That will generate a separate form letter from PSE&G that they will send around mid-March, informing you that Energy Harbor has enrolled your account. Again, that is just an added layer of protection provided for in the BPU's rules. There's nothing you need to do. If you want to be in the program and you get that notification, you can just throw that in the garbage. If for some reason you have either changed your mind or didn't realize that you hadn't opted out or whatever the case may be, if you see that PSE&G letter and you say, no, that's not what I want, I don't want to be with Energy Harbor, you can call PSE&G. They'll provide a phone number on PSE&G's letter. And at that point, you will call PSE&G, just say, no, I don't want that enrollment to go through, and PSE&G will cancel the enrollment. And then finally, I always emphasize, even after the initial enrollment, residents can change their mind anytime and opt out, anytime at all with no penalty. So 1 month in, 3 months in, 6 months in, a year in, whenever, if you decide you no longer want to be in the program, whether that's to go back to PSE&G or go with another third-party supplier, you're welcome to do so. And there's never any penalty or fee. So again, an overview of that small segment of residents who were removed from the initial pool of customers who were sent the mailing. First, it's customers with existing third-party supply contracts or with an existing solar power system, were the primary ones. Again, there's a few people that were on our do not disturb list, which were also pulled out. Folks that either were pulled out because they have their own contract or they have solar can still participate by opting into the program. And then we say, however, though. So if you have your own third-party supply contract, we don't know what the terms and conditions that you got yourself into, through your own, decision. So we encourage you to compare the prices, compare the product in terms of renewable energy content, make sure you understand and compare it to what we've provided here in terms of what the SEA program provides. And we also very strongly encourage you to read the language in your existing contract for early termination fees, because that's something we see often in these in third-party supply contracts, not done through a GEA program. And we want you to be sure that you understand and are comfortable that you're terminating your current contract to come join the SEA program will not expose you to any termination fees, because I've seen contracts where there may be a termination fee of, $75 or $100. So you want to jump ship to save $50 or $60 and get higher renewable energy content, but inadvertently expose yourself to a $100 fee from your current supplier and wind up, paying, overall increasing your cost. So we wouldn't want that to happen. So we just encourage folks before they decide to drop their current deal and come with the SEA program to just make sure you understand the terms of your current deal. And then folks with solar panels, we have that this isn't provided by rules, but we have decided as our firm that doing these programs over the years that our default is to pull people with solar out initially for two reasons. One is that most people with solar only use a little bit of residual power off the PSE&G grid anyway. So any incremental savings you might get from this program are pretty small because your net usage that's not being provided by your solar is pretty small. And the second reason is that most people with solar rely on something called net metering and banking of solar production in months when the solar power is produced in excess of what you use. Many of you may be scratching your head over what that means. If you do have solar, you'll understand what those terms mean. And so we have found that, and again, PSE&G is the only entity that is able to provide this net metering function that provides you this credit. So any third-party supplier cannot offer that. So typically, in our experience, the vast majority of people that have solar generally do better on PSE&G supply than a third-party supply contract of any kind, not just the SEA program, but any third-party supplier. So again, we just encourage folks with solar, if they're interested in joining the program, make sure you understand the terms of your deal, whether you're over producing. You might want to talk to your solar vendor or PSE&G before you make that decision. So the program timeline, just quickly again, the bid was awarded back in November. The opt-out packages were mailed on February 5th, and you received them early the following week for the most part. Tonight's our public information session. The 30-day opt-out period ends on March 7th. The enrollment, the next step, if you don't opt out, is you would receive an enrollment notification from PSE&G around mid-March. And then the next step would be service commences in April of 2021 with your MRD as your meter read date. And then service would conclude on September 2022 at the end of the 17-month term. So quickly, your PSE&G bill, and I'm going to put up the next slide, I think is going to have an example of a bill. But quickly, your PSE&G bill is broken into two main components: delivery charges and supply charges. If you are in this program, you will notice the bill will look very much the same, except the Energy Harbor supply charges will replace the PSE&G supply charges. Other than that, it's the same. And then we have a few slides here about something called a pod ID number. That's a 20-digit number. That's on your bill. You have an account number, and then you also have a pod ID number. For purposes of third-party supply, the pod ID number is what's relevant. So if you're going to reach out to Energy Harbor or Gabel Associates about your account and participation in the program, you'll want to have your POD ID number handy. It's the 20-digit number beginning with PE followed by 18 numerals. And here is the sample of the bill. So basically, you see here, there's a section called delivery charges. Those will stay exactly the same if you're on this program. The bottom part, supply charges, you see in this example, there are cost of electric supplied by PSE&G. Those line items would simply be replaced by the Energy Harbor charges instead. So other than that, the bill looks exactly the same. Okay. So again, quick recap. I'll go through this quickly. Everyone's in initially subject to your ability to opt out, except for third-party supply. People with their own third-party supply contracts or their own solar. This the baseline product has a 40% renewable energy content, which is nearly double the content of the basic supply service provided by PSE&G, and the price is lower than the average PSE&G price to compare. We're projecting, based upon the most recent information, about $50 to $60 in savings, in addition to the higher renewable content. You can opt out anytime you want, up to March 7th. If you opt out, you'll be pulled out and will not be enrolled. After that, if you opt out, you may be briefly enrolled, but you can get out at the next available PSE&G meter read date. Again, very importantly, the contract price does not vary. It cannot vary, but it doesn't vary by month. It can't be adjusted with market conditions or after a teaser period. The rate is the rate. And the price will stay the same over the length of the contract. Again, important point. Some folks ask us, does this affect my reliability of my supply? PSE&G is and will always remain the delivery company. They are the entity responsible for maintaining reliability of the local grid. They answer to the BPU. They are regulated for their delivery service. If the lights go out for any reason at all, an accident down the street, weather, whatever the case may be, you still call PSE&G at their toll-free number to get the power restored. Again, emphasizing you still will receive one bill for electricity from PSE&G that will simply have Energy Harbor's power supply charges on that bill. Important here. So residents who have budget billing arrangements with PSE&G will automatically be set up with a budget billing plan from Energy Harbor. The way Energy Harbor sets the initial budget amount is they basically take your recent 12-month historical usage, divide it by 12, which would be your average monthly usage, and then multiply that by the contract rate, and that's the starting budget plan amount. And then Energy Harbor will monitor that throughout. And this is an important point because I know partly because I think Direct Energy dropped the ball a little bit, and partly just because of unusual circumstances. We do know that there were some folks that at the end of the round one contract received a final true up on their bill that was in some cases sizable. What essentially happens is you pay a flat amount every month, and then what's always tracked, and this is the same thing PSE&G does, is that's always tracked against how much you actually use. So you pay, let's say you're paying $100 a month, and every month you use a different amount of energy, and so you accrue either if you are paying that month less than what you actually use under the budget plan, that will develop a positive balance, and conversely, in months where your budget payment pays for more than what you use in that month, you'll develop a credit, and that's sort of tracked over the life of the contract. And a third-party supplier with a finite contract period, at the end of the contract period, they have no other choice but to true you up through a final settlement on your last bill, and that will either be a credit if you've paid for a little more than what you've actually used, or vice versa, a charge if you've used more than what you've paid for. And what we have reemphasized and really focused on with Energy Harbor is to very closely monitor the budget billing balances for customers on budget billing, and then make adjustments along the way if necessary to keep those amounts relatively in check, so that with the goal that at the end of the 17-month contract, those folks on budget billing will not receive a significant final true-up one way or the other, on the positive side or the credit side. And so they're going to be monitoring that monthly. We're going to be regularly checking with them and asking for files to review those balances and then do adjustments as necessary with the goal of keeping people relatively on pace with what they should have. I would add that part of the issue we ran into with the last contract is, as I described, the supplier generally sets up the budget billing plan based upon historical usage, which is your average usage on a month. And what we saw happen in a lot of cases over the last year is because of the changes with COVID-19, and many folks basically shut in their homes, working from home, kids not going to school, staying home and taking online classes. We saw a significant increase in residential energy usage in 2020. Very unusual, sort of a very outlier event, and that definitely contributed to some folks building up a balance that at the end they owed some additional money. And I always emphasize that in the end, even with the final true up, you pay for exactly what you used at the contract rate, no more, no less. And so even folks who got a final settlement on their bill, they did save money. It may not have seemed like it at the time when you had a final charge on your last bill, but you still save money over the life of the contract because the total amount that you were billed under the SEA program was less than what you would have paid for under the PSE&G program, under PSE&G rates. The final point I'll just mention, some people ask this, if you receive financial assistance on your PSE&G bill, and typically that would either be like a lifeline program or a low income heating assistance program. There's no, being part of this program does not jeopardize that in any way. Those credits are flowed through the PSE&G bill from the appropriate assistance agency at the state level or federal level. And so you're still receiving a PSE&G bill, those credits will still apply. So there's no change at all in financial assistance if you happen to get that on your bill. And that concludes the presentation. So with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions that come up.
Okay, so we have, so Lauren, can you get rid of the shared screen?
Sure can.
Thank you. Also, just want to introduce, we have our Deputy Mayor Dean Daffis is on the call also. We have a bunch of questions and we'll just go through them real quick, Bob.
Sure.
And, we spent a lot of time, so I want to make sure we get the questions.
Yep.
Someone said the opt-out card requires a signature of an account holder. This person says sometimes there's situations where the account holder is not able to sign because the person's deceased, too ill, away on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
What's the alternative? Now, is the alternative to call?
It would be. I mean, I'll be honest, those cards are barcoded. So really, if you are, we actually got one of these question like this through a net, I guess came from a resident, that in that case, it was the account name was in a deceased husband. And in that case, I think it would be fine for the surviving spouse to sign that card because in the end, it's just going to be scanned to a barcode. And, I'm not an attorney, but the deceased spouse of a passed away person, I think would surely qualify as being a appropriate person to sign for them. But if you don't want to go through that, the alternative way the best way would be to either call or email, depending on how technologically sophisticated the person is, they can call either Energy Harbor or call Gabel Associates or email us or Energy Harbor. So any one of those ways would be fine.
Okay, and if they call Energy Harbor, it's 1-866-636-3749.
That's correct.
Okay. Person said that they didn't get anything in the mail. Again, they want to opt out, so they can just call that number, right? 1-866-636-3749.
They can. If they did not receive a mailing, there's one of two things. Either they just maybe didn't recognize what it was and inadvertently threw it out, in which case they'd still have to opt out. If they did not receive the mailing, then they actually did not. There's a good chance they're not in the eligibility list. And, if you didn't receive a mailing, you're not on the list, so you're not in the program. But I think it's safe to be sure. So they can call that toll-free number, or they can reach out to us as well. Shoot us an email or a phone call, and we'll look up the account as well. If it turns out the account's not on our list, then there's nothing we need to do because they wouldn't be in the program. But it's always good to be sure. Either way, again, call either us or Energy Harbor, or email either us or Energy Harbor, and have that pot at the 20-digit pot ID number that I mentioned earlier. That's really the key identifier we would use to look through the account up.
Okay. Someone wanted to know, are there any circumstances under which we could lose power and/or prices could go sky high, such as what happened in Texas over the last couple of weeks?
Okay, so the loss of power, I'm not going to promise you your power will never go out, but if it does, it has nothing to do with this contract. The power grid is at the regional level is controlled by a regional power grid called PJM. They're responsible for the reliability of the grid at the wholesale level. And then at the local level, it's PSE&G's responsibility. They're the delivery company. So nothing changes there at all. With respect to the change in price, the answer to that is no. So what folks were probably reading about down in Texas is they just had a perfect storm of a lot of bad things happen. And they're probably over half the generation in that state went offline because of the extreme weather. And certainly extreme for them. Like probably for us, it wouldn't seem extreme, but down there it was. And so what happened is they had no choice but to implement rolling blackouts to keep the system in balance, basically, because usage was way up, the amount of power generation was way down. The other thing about the Texas power grid that's very unique is that they're the only, other than Alaska and Hawaii, in the continental U.S., they're the only state that has a standalone power grid. The Texas grid is standalone and is not interconnected with any surrounding states. So when a lot of their generation went down due to the cold weather and the icing, they had nowhere to turn. So our grid is completely different. Our grid is 13 states and the District of Columbia tied together as one integrated grid that operates as one grid. It's all one system. And then our grid is interconnected directly with New York, New England, the Midwest grid, and the Southeast grid. So we have a lot of ways that our grid, if necessary, can lean on others that aren't experiencing the same weather.
So Rob, that's good. Let's keep moving because these are a lot of questions.
Got it. Okay.
Sorry.
So the second question, real quick. So what happened in Texas, because there was so much of a loss of generation, spot market prices went through the roof. A lot of folks down there had what's something called an index product, which is a spot market based product. So they're paying spot prices in real time. And so that's what people might have read about, but these high bills. Our contract's a fixed price.
Fixed
It's
price
not
for
exposed to
17
spot
months.
market at all.
Okay. So this person says that in January, his PSE&G bill went up 225% with only a 3% increase in usage. His rates were 12.5% to 12.5 cents to 13.2 cents per kilowatt. The rate is quoted in our letter is 12.7 cents per kilowatt. If he understands the comparison, then he would be paying more. Would you agree?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the PSE&G rate does fluctuate month to month. So in an individual month, there is a chance that the PSE&G rate might be slightly lower, but over the life of the contract, the average difference will be about $50 to $60 to the good. So you can point to any individual month and find an individual month where the PSE&G rate might be slightly lower, but over the life of the contract, we should be good to the good by $50 to $60.
Okay. Someone wants to know if they opt out up to 100% renewable option now, but later find it's too expensive. Can you decide later to go back to the regular Energy Harbor rate?
You can. The best way we think to do that would be probably to contact Energy Harbor and sort of do like a opt out and then opt back in at the regular product. That's probably the cleanest way to do it because they already have their account set up in the billing system at a certain rate. So the answer is yes, but that's the mechanics of how I would recommend doing it if you wanted to do that.
Okay. And so just for example, if someone wanted to do it, they would stay on for say 6 months. They decide they want to switch, they would contact Energy Harbor and do that switch as you described.
That's correct.
Okay. And then what about if someone wanted to opt out? If they opt out now, can they opt in at any time during the 17 months?
Yes.
We're not used to you giving us yes or no answers.
I'm trying to get better. I got
Okay.
chastised by the mayor.
All right.
But no green product though. If you want the green product, that has to be done by March 6th. Just another reminder.
Say that again, Jesse.
If you want the green, if you'd like to opt up to the green product, that would have to be done before March 6th.
Yes, that's
Okay.
a good point, Jesse. That's a limited period. The selection of the 100% product can only happen in these first 30 days. The reason is that the premium that we got is already out of date. If we were to reset that today, it would probably be higher. So Energy Harbor can't honor that premium forever because the price for renewable energy is continually changing. And recently it's gone up. So that's a good point, Jesse. If you want the 100% product, that you can only do in the first 30 days. You can always go back down, but you can't opt up after the 30-day period.
So someone has a third-party contract now with Clean Choice. And they want to know if it's better to go with our program or stay with Clean Choice.
So I'm not going to give a specific answer on that because it's always up to the customer. And I don't want to, disparage any deal. What I will say is I've been asked this question in the past, and when I've gone on the Clean Energy Choice program, they have some words that are suggestive that the renewable energy is sourced from the regional power grid, but there's no definitive statement of such. And I read it as being a little bit of coy language. So I believe that the Clean Energy Choice program has national wind recs, which, as we've talked about, are not nearly of the quality and not nearly as much of a influencer in the renewable energy market as what we have, because our program specifies PJM regional power grid class 1 recs. So I would just encourage folks to look closely at that issue and look at the price and make their own value judgment.
Okay. And someone who's a tenant, they, after the first round of the SCA, their last bill, they got a charge of almost $200. And this may have been for the pricing. They want to know if this is going to be the same thing with this program, or will it be on the actual month-to-month energy use?
So if the customer is right now enrolled with a budget plan with PSE&G, their account is marked as such, and Energy Harbor's instructions are to automatically set them up for a budget plan. If the customer does not want a budget plan, they can simply call Energy Harbor and say, I want to be billed month to month. I don't want a budget plan. It's the customer's decision. The only other thing I'll mention is that we're the combination of, we don't think we're going to have an anomalous event like we had last year where a lot of people's usage went way up because of COVID at their homes. And also we've really, really put the screws to Energy Harbor to be doubly diligent about monitoring accounts and adjusting as necessary. So, if they just want to get out of a budget plan, they can do that by calling Energy Harbor. And other than that, we are very hopeful that any true up balances at the end of this contract will be much more benign than round one.
Okay. Someone wants to know, why is the price differential much smaller than the prior energy aggregation program? And with that, why can't PSE&G provide the same level of renewable energy as the alternative supplier?
Okay, the price is higher because the market has changed. The last time when our first round contract we bid in March of 2019, the market has changed significantly since then, and power is just not as cheap. All components of power, renewable energy is more expensive, transmission is more expensive, energy is a bit more expensive, although still relatively cheap. So it's just the market, but also PSE&G's rates have gone up by somewhat as well since 2019, just not as much as the change in the market. So that's the reason. It's basically the market tells us. We took a competitive bid. We had 5 competing suppliers, and we got the lowest price of the competing suppliers. So this is a market-based price. And second part of the question, Vic,
why can't PSE&G provide the same level of renewables?
So they're not allowed to. They go out to the market, as I described earlier, and buy a plain vanilla product that is compliant with the state's minimum renewable standards, and that's the only product they're allowed to offer. And that's why you need to either shop on your own or go through a program like this to get a greener product.
Okay. Have you had any clients or municipalities decide not to renew after a contract? And if so, how come?
We've probably had 1 or 2. And honestly, the main reason for those was generally a change in administration and philosophy and priorities at the governmental level, not so much anything particular with the program.
Okay. Folks, we're getting to the end of the questions. If you have any more, you can put them in the chat or in the Q&A. This person owns a 2-family home, and the card they receive lists the floor 1, but does not mention floor 2. It says floor 2 is currently with Harborside Energy. Would that be the reason?
That would be. If they have their own third-party supply contract, they would not have received a card and will not be included unless they proactively opt into the program.
So in order to do that, they would have to call or contact Energy Harbor, and then they would be permitted to do that.
That's correct.
Okay. If someone opts in, that you wouldn't opt in. If someone just got into the program, are there any of the fees that they'd be paying in addition to PSE&G?
In addition to PS, if they're not in
Well,
the
any
program?
fees, would PSE&G charge them any fees for their supply
Oh,
above?
no. PSE&G, I think we probably talked about, this is one of the things we talked about in round one, is that PSE&G does not make any money on the power supply. They pass whatever their costs are, they pass through dollar for dollar into their rates. So if someone leaves PSE&G Power Supply and goes with Energy Harbor, PSE&G just, let's say the rate's 13 cents. They collect 13 cents less from the customer. They pay 13 cents less to their wholesale supplier. It's a wash. So they're not impacted. So they're not going to charge you anything for leaving their power supply.
Okay. So this person, we answered his question, but he says we think we misunderstood it. He's saying the supply rate in his bill is 0.125 at the highest tier, and it goes down based upon usage to 0.13. So he wants to know the supply rate Gabel Associates is quoting is 0.126. That is higher. Why is that?
I honestly don't understand that question as any different than I did the first time. I think he said 0.125 up to 0.13. So 0.13 is higher than our rate. And I'll just tell you, like the PSEG has a basic generation service tariff rate that's relatively flat. It's currently around 13 cents. It's going to go up to about 13.5 cents in June. They also apply a monthly adjustment factor where the net price to compare fluctuates, and it can fluctuate anywhere from, say, the low 12 cents up to 14 cents or thereabouts. And based upon the base tariff price and the normal fluctuations in the tariff, our projection is that as compared to the 12.7 cent contract rate, the PSE&G rate will average somewhere around 13.3 or 13.4 over the life of the contract.
Okay, can I ask you could you give your phone number of your office so this person could maybe give you a call and dig a little deeper with this? He's asked the question twice, and I want to make sure we get his answer.
So I'll give you the best one is we have a dedicated GEA program line, and that number is 855-365-0770.
Could you just say it again?
Sure. It's 855-365-0770.
Okay.
Or he can send an email to our help desk if he wants to sort of write. Some people like to write a lot and get it all down on paper. Our help desk is SEA-info@gabelassociates.com.
Gabel.
Correct. JBEL. Correct.
Associates. Okay.
Yep.
The last question we have up right now is to request actual billing and not budget billing. Should the company be called after March 7th, or can we call it any time?
I would wait till after the opt-out period, but let me just emphasize something. So only those folks who have a budget plan with PSE&G will be enrolled for budget billing by Energy Harbor. We did have the unfortunate circumstance where in round one, where Direct Energy screwed up basically and inadvertently enrolled many customers, more than just those folks that have a budget plan with PSE&G. They enrolled them initially, then we went through a process of having the Direct Energy send a letter out. So that question I'm reading is maybe from someone who went through that experience last time that doesn't have budget billing. If you don't have a budget plan with PSE&G, you don't have to worry about it. You'll be set up as a pay-as-you-go. It's only if you have a budget plan with PSE&G and you don't want a budget plan with Energy Harbor for the supply portion, then you would call Energy Harbor at their toll-free number. And I would suggest doing that after March 7th, after the enrollment period's over, because right now you're not a customer record. They're not going to set you up as a customer of record until after the opt-out period is closed.
Okay, so we've exhausted all the questions we've had. So Bob, just want to ask you a question. How many customers do you expect to be in this round with the 7 municipalities?
So the initial eligible pool, we'll say, that got mailings in the 7 towns combined, and Jesse can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's around 46,000. And then obviously some folks will opt out, and some people over time, there'll be attrition as folks move and close out their accounts. So over the length of the contract, I cannot say. But we have 46,000 in the initial eligibility pool. Usually we have 5 to 10% opt out initially, something like that. It usually the opt out rates tend to get a little lower the second time around because folks are more comfortable with the program. But let's just say it's 10% opt out rate. So then that would get us down to around, about 42,000 or so initially, and then we'll go down from there.
And based on your experience, it seems like an awful lot of people, based on your experience with other aggregation pools or individual municipalities, where would you rank that in size, as far as size?
It's certainly the largest one we've dealt with. I think there's an aggregation group of about 10 towns up in Morris County, but those tend to be smaller towns.
Yeah,
So
they're
this
not
is
gonna be that.
this is among the biggest, if not the biggest.
Right. So one of the things is we're using our combined power to negotiate price, but we're also driving the industry to become more green. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. What we're doing is going out, having our supplier buy up RECs, class 1 RECs in the marketplace, which is mostly wind energy, and retiring those so they are permanently removed from the marketplace. So what that means is that as the demand for renewable energy gradually goes up, with New Jersey and other states in the region pushing more renewable energy, there's no other option but for the market to go out and build more wind power to meet that future demand, because we're taking the current supply permanently out of the marketplace. And that has a meaningful impact on the development of new wind power.
And do you have a sense of how many customers in Maplewood were in the first round?
So, the initial participation rate was probably about 85 to 90%. And then there was, the normal attrition over time as people move. And I'd say by the end, it was probably about 2/3, something like that, of the residents in town.
Customers, right?
Of the
Residential
customers,
customers.
of the households, residential accounts, correct.
Okay. Gable folks, anything else you want to say?
I think we've covered everything, Vic. We had some really good questions, and we're happy to answer them. And I think we covered everything we wanted to cover.
And town folks, anything you want to say? Good night.
Good night, and sorry I was late, everyone.
It's all right, Glenn. All right, folks, thank you very much. We had, at one point, we had over 40 people in the audience. So I want to thank you all for coming out. And this is really a good thing. We were able to track 2 additional towns, one in Bergen County and an additional Essex County. So this is just going to grow, I think, in round 3. So it's good. We're moving the market, and we're saving money for our residents. So thank you all. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.